This
Um,
conference.
Clem or Mary Jane, if you all, or Joni just showed up. Okay, if any of you three have your script done, could you share it with, let's see, is there a chat? Let me post the email address here. Share it with this email address that I just put in the GoToMeeting chat, and that way we'll have access to it in Caltix.
I didn't get mine done, unfortunately, but I'm
Okay,
working on it.
no problem. Okay. All right, well, welcome everyone. I think we have everyone probably that we're going to have. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We do have with us our guest for later on, Gary Cowett, is sort of lurking in the background, listening in. I'll formally introduce him in just a bit when we're ready to bring him in. Today, we're going to be going into pre-production for your project, and some of what we're going to talk about today might feel a little bit like overkill for a project where you're working by yourself in quarantine. But I think that when you go into any process and try to adopt that professional attitude of preparation, it's beneficial. For instance, in my class, this is the same process I go through with my students, and they did this in quarantine as well. And they were all working by themselves, basically with themselves as actors or maybe a sibling. And, often the way, they've been making films like that all the time on their own before even coming into school. And so I thought, are they going to think this lesson is ridiculous? Are they going to think, oh, I had to go through all these steps? But actually, they all came back and said, wow, that was such a better experience because I was prepared. We weren't making the shots up as we were going. We had everything we needed. We weren't constantly stopping to like, oh no, we forgot this prop. And so I think you'll find that this is a really good process to learn. And especially if you ever plan to, once quarantine is lifted and work with other people in collaborative projects, doing this kind of prep work is just so essential to being able to get everybody on the same page. So in pre-production, filmmakers anticipate logistical challenges and plan their shoot. So this is the process of saying, all right, here I have this script. Now I have to somehow turn this script into at least first of all, into footage that an editor can put together, right? So how do I get this process from a script to footage that an editor can put together? I have to get this crew in line. I have to get my actors. I have to get a budget. I have to schedule a whole shoot, order everything that we're going to be doing, getting all the props, the set dressing. And so it's all that process that happens in pre-production. So in today's agenda, we're going to go through a few things. We're going to talk about what's called a breakdown of your script. And that's where we go through and identify all the needs that you need to secure in order to make your production. We're going to talk a little bit about scouting and prepping your locations. Obviously, for you all, you've been working with available resources. So hopefully you are working with locations you kind of already know. But we still want to go through the process of sort of really scouting those locations and making sure that we've considered all the considerations that are valuable. Like, what are the sound issues? For instance, I think it was Clem is thinking about shooting in a family restaurant. Are there some really loud refrigeration going on that you might need to unplug some equipment during your shoot that because there's going to be a loud buzzing in the background? So going through those considerations of each location is really valuable. We're going to talk a little bit about creating a shot list. This afternoon, Kurt is going to cover a little bit more about sort of shot composition and how to make good shots. This morning, we're just going to talk about some of the things you might want to think about in terms of picking the shots to give you options in your editing room. So how do you translate that script into discrete images that you can cut together? We'll talk a little bit about scheduling your shoot. Again, pretty much probably most of you are going to be shooting all tomorrow in one day, but we'll still talk about how do you order the shots you're going to get. It's often best if you can shoot things in script order for the actors, but in fact, we know that most film and television is not shot in order of that the script is written. because it doesn't always work logistically. You're not going to kind of go to one location, go to another location, go back to the other location, back and forth all the time. And even within your shot list, you need to think about what order you are going to shoot those individual shots. When you're doing a conversation, you're not going to shoot one side and go back to the other side and go to this side. You're going to order your shots in a way so that you save as much time as possible. So we're going to talk about how to do that. So all of that I'm going to do in a kind of a quick overview, and then we're going to go into Celtics and show you how to actually do it in the software, and looking at some of the tools that they have. And then we'll hand it over to Gary to give you tips from the trenches, so to speak. Talk about how some of the production challenges he's had in his career and how he's had to think about them. And obviously, a lot of his examples are going to be at this level when we're at this level. But you can learn so much from how professionals adapt to those challenges and think about how you apply them to your own projects. All right, any questions before we go forward?
Well, before we go forward, Andrew, actually, we
yes.
forgot to do something from yesterday, so we should show that off first.
Yes, thank you. So I just got Clem's pick this morning, so we wanted to share Clem's pick of the Raider Challenge. So Gary, so you know what's going on. We had students, everybody did a little challenge where they had to recreate using available materials a shot from Raiders of the Lost Ark. You might recognize what shot this is. It's the exchange of the idol at the beginning of Raiders. So everybody made their own, and they had 15 minutes to do it. So they had 15 minutes to pull together whatever resources they might have laying around to shoot their own version. Nice job, Clem. All right, let's go back to PowerPoint. All right, so we're going to start with a script breakdown. And again, I will actually take you through this process in Celtics. And while I'm working in Celtics, you can open up your own project in Celtics and sort of follow along as well if you want to. This process used to be done all by hand, and there's still old timers who do it that way, where you would actually take the script, a printed script in hand with a ruler and pencils, colored pencils or maybe markers, and you'd go through your script. And first of all, you'd do a dividing line between every single scene, and you count each scene and duration in 1/8 of a page. And so if roughly speaking, and obviously this isn't hold true exactly, but roughly speaking, a page equals a minute of screen time. So a 1/8 of a page, more or less, is going to equal about 7.5 seconds of screen time. But of course, an experienced production manager knows that that's not always true. And so sometimes you have to look at something, and our guest yesterday gave the example of like someone might write in a script that like there's a battle scene and that's a 1/8 page scene, and they haven't written any description of it. Well, an experienced production manager is going to look at that and say like, well, obviously this is going to be more than 1/8. I have to think about what the actual duration of this project is going to be. And so you measure out all the scenes in 1/8 of a page. So, you'll have a scene that's, 3/8 of a page, or you might have 2 5/8 because it's a 2-page and 5/8 of a page. So you do all that, measuring each scene. In this process, you are kind of counting up, you do something called breakdown sheets. And again, Celtics does all this for you in an automated way. But in the old days, you would have a sheet for every scene, and you would write down the location, the time of day of each scene, so that you could organize your scenes that way during scheduling, so that you could group locations, you can group day scenes versus night scenes, you can group interior scenes and exterior scenes. So you need to be able to track all of that. And that's why that slug line is so important in script formatting, because if you don't have that, and if it's not formatted correctly, the person doing your breakdown isn't going to know when your scene takes place, where it takes place, and all that. And the key part of this is identifying all the elements in your scene. And these are things like actors, props, animals, stunts, greenery, like if you have plants, set dressing, wardrobe, special hair and makeup. You're finding all these different elements and usually color coding them different colors. So you might, depending on, what list you have, you might have, red for characters or purple for props, and you're going through with a colored pencil and marking all of these different elements and then putting them in your breakdown sheet so that, if you can pull out any breakdown sheet for any scene, and by looking at that sheet, you can see where it takes place, when it takes place, who's in it, all the props that are in it, all the set dressing that needs to be done, which wardrobe is being used. And so in planning your shoot, you know exactly what needs to be on set when you shoot that scene. So it's really useful for planning. Now, and again, what's so great today is that we do this mostly digitally, and makes it super easy. You do have to be careful with digital tools though, because so they can make mistakes and they can miss things. So you do have to still be really attentive to the script and look for everything that is there. After you do your breakdown, you will start, you're going to start scouting your locations. And so you need to figure out, what do you need from your locations? So as you look at your locations, and again, you probably wrote with a specific location in mind, but you may not have thought through your location for all the production elements. So not only do you need locations that fit the visual and narrative need of your script, so obviously does it fulfill the need of the story? Is it visually interesting? Is it what you want for your film? And those are probably the reasons why you chose it when you were writing. But now you have to think about all those other elements. Is there enough room for actors, for the equipment, for the crew? If you have a scene of characters hiding in a closet, you might think, oh yeah, I have a closet. Now you have to think about, wait, does that room where that closet is going to have room for my camera department, my sound department, all that kind of stuff? Now, obviously, you all are going to be working in very small teams, maybe just by yourself, and so that's not as much of a concern for you. But certainly going forward, if you're ever scouting locations, you got to think about where all these people are going to go. Do you have access to parking? Because you'll need to get your actors there, your crew there, all that kind of stuff. Are you able to load in and load out your equipment? If you're using any kind of gear, can you get that gear into the space that you're using? Do you have either access to power to use lights, or does it have good natural light? So you might be thinking of a location that you're like, oh, this would be an ideal location. But then you get there on the day of your shoot and you're shooting in the afternoon, but guess what? The shadow from the house next door has now put it entirely in shadow and it looks like crap, right? And so one of the things you got to think about in assessing your location is looking at where does the light sit at different times of day. If it's an interior location, do I have somewhere where I can plug in lights? And even if you don't have professional film lights, can I plug in a lamp, or a China ball, something like that, to give it just a little bit better light? If you don't have that access, you might be in trouble. Probably the number one thing you all should be thinking about is loud noises. What are the sounds that are going on in this location? So something I do with my students when we go over locations is I take them on a location scouting trip. I just take them across campus to different locations and tell them to assess all the issues with that location. And part of it is we all are silent for a couple of minutes, just sitting there listening, and we talk about all the things we identify. Well, I heard a lawnmower, I heard an air conditioner, I heard a helicopter. And so thinking about all the different things, oh, I heard a train go by. So when you're assessing your location, you got to figure all that out. Like a good location manager or location scout is going to figure out, like, okay, we definitely hear trains go by. What's the train schedule? Well, when can I anticipate that there's going to be loud trains going through? Or we know that there's lawn maintenance going on. I'm going to need to communicate with the landscape department to see, can we reschedule that, or make sure that we don't schedule at the same time that they're doing that work. Is anyone doing a house remodel next door on the day of my shoot? So all that kind of stuff that you need to think about, because if you have lots of awful noises going on, that really is going to ruin the sound of your film, and can be, really sink your film if you don't have good sound. Another really important thing, I skipped over bathrooms. That's also very important, of course. You want to make sure that your cast and crew have access to bathrooms. Nothing will shorten your shoot more than if no one can go to the bathroom, if there's nowhere for people to relieve themselves. So make sure you have that. But then the other, I think, most important element is safety hazards. Making sure that you're paying attention to your location and thinking about all the ways that someone could get hurt. Film is fun. Film is important. I'm, obviously this is my life, is teaching people how to make films. I think film is extremely important. I think lives are changed by cinema, but no film is important enough for people to get hurt. And so we do sometimes see people who take shortcuts. We see people who take risks that are unnecessary in order to get a shot that they think is necessary to tell their story. That's never an excuse. So when you're scouting your locations, look for things where, are there tripping hazards? Are there falling hazards? Are there things hanging above that could fall on someone? Or is there exposed wiring somewhere? Just think about all those things that could go wrong and note them. And sometimes doesn't mean that you can't use that location. It means being really careful and making sure that those hazards are marked. It means making sure that you have a safety meeting before you shoot and tell everyone what those hazards are. But of course, there may be some hazards that mean, this is just not a great location. This is too dangerous. So do take that really seriously when you're scouting your locations. You obviously need to ask when you're scouting locations, do I need permission to shoot here? Sometimes you need a permit, depending on what city you're shooting in. Some cities have different requirements. I think a lot of cities don't require a permit if you're in private property, but some do. The kind of shooting you're doing, for instance, I think Medford requires a permit even when you're on private property. The level of production you guys are doing is not, you don't need to worry about getting a permit for this. But do know the rules, because there are some places, and I don't know necessarily of any in this region, but where even someone shooting with a camera, with their own camera, without a tripod, even in a park, someone will shut you down if you don't have a permit. I've been in places like that. I don't think anyone around here is like that, but it's good to research the rules of your location and know what the rules are, because if you do decide to bend them, you could get shut down, and it's important to know that and be prepared for that. So it's always best if you can go, follow the rules and get the required permits, but certainly don't go on someone's private property without their permission. Just because there's like a cool field next door to your house, and you think, oh, I can go shoot in that field, but if it's private property, you should find out who owns that property and get their permission, because you could get in a lot of trouble. And then the other thing is when you're shooting on locations is assessing the risk that the crew poses to the set. Gary can probably tell you a fun story about wood floors later on for a shoot that he was planning. I've had some run-ins with wood floors myself, where my film had to spend a lot of money replacing flooring in a house, in two houses actually, because the crew did not take care of the floors when they were moving in equipment and set dressing. And so you have to think about those things, like, okay, are these nice floors? Do I need to lay down some cardboard on the floor so that we're walking on cardboard and setting up equipment on cardboard? Put down some rugs. Are there fragile decorations in this house that we can put in bubble wrap and sort of like set aside for the owner so that they don't get hurt, damaged while we're shooting? So just pay attention to all those things. I also encourage you not only to take location photos for the scouting process in terms of knowing what the visuals of what your location the visuals your location presents to you, but also to make sure that your location looks the way you found it when you leave. And so, because you never know, like if someone says, sure, you can shoot in my house, and then you go and you shoot and everything's fine, you know you didn't do anything, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, there's this scratch on my floor, that was you. And you're like, no, I know that wasn't me. Well, I'm saying it was you. Well, take photos and note in the photo before you start shooting, like, hey, I just wanted you to see in this photo, we found that there's a scratch on your floor, and we just wanted you to like note that before we start shooting. Just make sure that you account for when you're done, you can put everything back the way it was, and the location owner can look and say, yes, this looks good, you're all good, thanks for coming and treating my location well. So that's my little crash course there in location scouting.
For context to that, the film industry, obviously Hollywood is the epicenter of filmmaking, but there is so many permits and so many hoops and taxes that they have to jump through to film in Los Angeles. There's still a ton of production that takes place in Los Angeles, but in recent years, if you've been astutely watching TV or film, you've noticed that there's a lot of production that's now done in places like Georgia, in New Mexico, in Vancouver, British Columbia, because those are places where they can mimic the look and feel of LA a little bit, but those communities are a lot more relaxed as far as the permits and the taxes and fees that go into film production in Hollywood.
For now, and then
Yeah.
eventually that'll change again, and the new place will become the new place. Yeah, there will always see these kind of, I think, waves, and of course Portland's another place where people come. And other places in Oregon. We've certainly attracted some stuff here in Southern Oregon. The other tip to you is spend some time in your locations on set dressing and some production design. Here's a little example that from some students in one of my classes, where they had a scene on a deck, and on the left is the deck that was at their house, and so they had a deck, but they actually put some energy into it, and so they redecorated. Now this cost a little bit of money because they had to buy paint, and they repainted the deck, but they also just kind of pulled together some different furniture from friends that they had, and could really dress it up to be a sort of a nicer deck, and that added production value to their film. One of the things I see that really brings down a student film in particular is where they find a location and just shoot at it, and they don't give any thought to actually what that location needs to look like for their story. The classic example is the dorm room. So no matter what story it is, it's just a dorm room with blank walls or something, an apartment with blank walls. Like they haven't put any thought about hanging some pictures up, or tidying it up a little bit, or making sure that it looks like real people live there. And that just really pulls you out of a movie when you walk into a space that doesn't feel lived in, that doesn't feel like real people live there and are part of it, and it's part of people's lives. That really impacts the story. So you don't have to paint a deck, but think about it. When you walk into that space and you say, oh, this is a good space for my room, for my scene, what doesn't fit? Think about your characters. Are the books that are on that shelf, are those the books that your character would have, or should you trade those books for something else? The picture that's on the wall, is that a picture that your character would have, or can you trade it for a little bit for something else? Is your character's car, right? If you're using your car, if you're the kind of person that has like funny stuff on the dashboard or whatever, like, is that the way your character's car would be? So be thinking about those things and dress your sets. It really adds production value. All right, so we're gonna rush through some shot list thoughts here, and some recommendations to think about when you're deciding what shots you need for your scene. So first of all, I would encourage you to always have some kind of master wide shot for your scene. And your master generally will cover everything that happens in the scene and lets you see the whole of the action. And you don't need to do like 17 takes of your master shot, because chances are you probably won't use that much of the master, but it's a nice protection to have because it shows you the whole geography of the scene. You can always go back to it if you realize, oh, I missed a detail in my close-ups. Well, you can always go back to that master if you have to, and it's a good protection to have that master. And it also gives you a sort of a low stakes way of working out the blocking of the scene and feeling comfortable with your actors before you jump in for additional coverage. When you're thinking about your shots and thinking about when you're looking at your scene and saying, what do I actually need shots of? Pay attention to your character's hands and eyes. If characters are looking at things, seeing things, or touching things, those might be times when you want to add a close-up. When you want to bring your audience's attention to what's going on. And so, for instance, if you see a character look at something, get a close-up of that character looking, and make sure you get a close-up of the thing they're looking at. And I've thrown an example here of two images that are not from the same movie, but just to give you an example of how, when you cut together two images, here's an image from, I think it's actually The Godfather 2. It might have been The Godfather. No, that is the original Godfather. And then I don't even know what this shot is from of a watch, but you see someone looking down, you cut to an image of a watch, you feel like, oh, he's checking to see what time it is, even though these are totally different movies. And we'll talk a little bit about editing and the technique of editing and how you do that later. But those are the kinds of shots you might want to get. If your script says so-and-so looks at their watch, well, you might miss that in your wide shot. Your wide shot might be too wide for your audience to really grasp. They might be looking over here, looking at a different character. So if it's important to know that this character is checking their time, get close-ups of that action. I think it's a good idea to get medium shots whenever you have sort of significant character action. Again, you might capture it all in a wide shot, but if a character is making a decision or taking an action that's sort of a pivotal point, this is a good time to get a little closer to the character. And a medium shot's nice because you can still see more of their body, right? You can still see what they're doing with their arms and hands. You can see them move around in the scene a little bit more than you can in a close-up, but it's close enough to see that emotional investment, right? We see the character's emotions better than in a wide shot. So those are times when you might want a medium shot. And especially in a conversation, if you are having dialogue, I would encourage you to get what's called a shot and reverse shot of your characters. Get a medium shot of each side of that conversation. And now, one thing to understand, which is a lot of people who've never filmed before don't realize this, is when you're doing shot reverse shot dialogue, you don't film each line of dialogue individually. I've actually seen my kids have done this before. For instance, they're 10 and 8 and they've made movies on their iPad, and that's how they'll do it. They'll say, all right, I need you to say this line. Okay, now you say the other line. And that's not how we film things. You film the entire scene from one side, get all that dialogue, and then when you're done shooting that side of the scene, you turn around and you shoot all the other side of the dialogue, but with matching medium shots so they look like they're talking to each other. Another option for those kinds of exchanges is called an over-the-shoulder. So here's an example of over-the-shoulder from Titanic. And you can see one of the nice things about an over-the-shoulder shot is it brings both the characters into the shot and creates a little bit more of a sense of intimacy. You can actually also create distance, which is interesting because depending on the lens you're using, I don't know how much Kurt's going to get into lenses today because probably most of you are going to be shooting again with a mobile phone or something. But a wide angle lens will, if you do an over the shoulder shot with a wide angle lens, it'll make characters look like they are farther apart from each other. Whereas if you shoot with a long lens or a tight lens, it'll make them look much closer together, and they can be in the same position. So that's another interesting thing that you can do is I've seen films where characters in let's say two characters in a dining room, it's like a husband and wife, and you want to show the marriage slowly growing apart across the movie, and they have these repeated scenes in a dining room. You can just change the lens and have the same exact setup, and slowly over the course of the film it'll feel like the characters are growing apart. So little tricks like that you can use if you do have lenses.
And a great example of using that perspective is the Lord of the Rings films.
Mm-hmm.
where they made all of the characters that played hobbits, when you saw them standing next to Gandalf or whoever, they looked like they were only 3 or 4 feet tall. But then you'd get close-up shots and it would look like they were about the same. How they did stuff like that was what Andrew's talking about with perspective, where, say for example, take the first Lord of the Rings film when Gandalf and Frodo are sitting on a wagon, and it looks like Elijah Wood is half the size of Ian McKellen. Well, what's actually happening is that Elijah Wood is sitting about 3 feet behind Ian McKellen in a specially designed seat, but the camera angle makes it look like they're sitting side by side. So the result is that because Elijah Wood's further away, but it looks like they're looking at each other, that they look like that size, but really they're about the same height. So that you can play with that perspective in terms of size and scale based on how close or how far away something is from the camera, as well as what kind of lens you use.
Yeah, absolutely. Great example. So the last one I would suggest you to think about is finding cutaway shots. Again, this is just kind of a thing to protect yourself. If you're getting multiple takes, and you should try to get multiple takes when you can. Obviously, you're going to be working very quickly, but it's always a good idea to get at least 2 takes of every shot just to make sure you have a couple of options. But let's say you have a dialogue scene, and you've done 2 takes of one side of the dialogue, and you realize in one take the actor really nails the first part of the line, but in the second take the second part of the line is better, and you really wish there's a way to connect those two, but you can't. You didn't get any other footage for that moment, and so you're like, all right, I guess I just got to pick the lesser of evils here. Well, if you got some cutaways, and that can be anything from like something going on in the room, some decoration or whatever, sometimes you can steal a moment there, and you can find a reason to cut away to something else that's in the room, an insert shot, and then come back and get the piece that you want to use. So finding little cutaways is always, I think, a good idea. But I do want to say, just in general, those are the tips, like things that I think are good, what we call coverage. And when we say coverage, that means it covers the scene and gives us lots of options for editing. But I also encourage you to be really creative, right? So get some of these like tried and true shots that will help you piece together your scene. But also try some wild stuff, right? Try to do something that you've never seen before. That's fun too. That's why you're making movies, is to experiment and learn, right? I'm going to try to go over the 180-degree rule here. I don't know if Kurt was planning on going over this at all in the afternoon as well to
I
reinforce it.
I was I was going to, but then I saw that you had it in your slides, so I figured, okay, well that's one less thing I need to talk about in the
Yeah.
afternoon.
So we'll try. It's always a little complex going into this, especially virtually. It's a lot easier, and actually, there's some good videos on this, so maybe we can pull a video and send you a link to it as well, because it's kind of hard to go over this without showing you physically an example. And oftentimes when I'm talking about it, students are looking at me like, what? And as soon as you show it with bodies, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. But the idea is that when you are covering a scene, particularly of a scene of 2 actors in interacting with one another, as soon as you pick a side that you're going to cover that scene from, you generally stay on that side, and that becomes the line of action. And there's a 180-degree arc where you can put the camera between those 2 actors. And so an example of what that might look like is on the left side of your screen, where you have the Oregon Duck and Rocky the Raider in a conversation with each other. And if your master shot is from this side of the scene, any coverage you choose will need to stay on that side and not go behind the actors. And the reason is, when you look at the coverage, what the close-ups or medium close-ups would look like in the top little frame, coverage angle A and coverage angle B, you see that when you do that, it looks like the actors are facing each other, right? So when you're cutting back and forth between these 2 shots, they're facing different directions, so it looks like they're talking to each other. But what happens if you look on the right side of the screen is, if when filming Rocky the Raider, if you decide to switch the camera beyond the 180-degree arc onto the other side of the Oregon Duck, that Rocky the Raider is going to look like he's looking the same direction as the Oregon Duck. So when you're cutting, it doesn't look like they're talking to each other. It looks like one's talking to the back of the head of the other, and the other's talking out into space, right? And so the 180-degree rule helps us create spatial geography that makes sense for the audience. They can always tell where people are and that and their relationship to one another and how they are speaking to one another. Now that said, sometimes you will see purposeful jumping of the line. I mean, you can watch any scene from television, any scene from film, and you'll see most of the time they obey the 180-degree rule. But you also see moments where they break it. And when you break it, it creates a point of emphasis. So you can often see, and it can be really interesting, if you have a scene where it's all from one side and there's suddenly kind of a new piece of information revealed or a new emotional beat, or a character says something that really provokes a reaction from the other character, you'll often see right then is when you see a jump of the 180-degree rule and the scene starts being covered from a different angle. And that can be a real point of emphasis because your audience notices that. Your audience is like, whoa, something's changed. The entire geography of the scene suddenly sort of changed. It's subconscious, it's in the back of our heads. But we see that something changed and now it creates a new dynamic. So you can certainly experiment with that. But know that whenever you do jump that line of action of 180 degrees, it does create a jolt. Your audience just sort of notices that something has changed because we're so used to seeing films presented in the 180-degree rule. There's also something called the 45-degree rule, and that just means that when you change angles, like let's say you when you're going in from a medium shot to a close-up, or from a master shot to a medium shot, it's a good idea to move the camera at least 45 degrees. Otherwise, it will look like a punch in. In other words, it's very disruptive. So for instance, if this is one shot and you cut immediately to this shot, right? That's going to feel like a huge punch in, like, whoa, we just jumped into that scene. Whereas if I'm in this shot and then you move in from a different angle over here as a cut, that's less disruptive to the visual cortex for some reason. We just know that we've studied the way people watch movies, and when you move the camera 45 degrees, they won't even notice the cut. We're just seeing a scene, and it just becomes invisible, and that's called continuity style, meaning we are conveying the sense of a continuity to the audience. They don't even notice the editing because it seems invisible to them. But if you don't move the camera 45 degrees, they will notice it. And that can be meaningful, right? Again, just the same way as the 180-degree jump is a point of emphasis. If you punch in on a character, if you're going to jump in on a single line without moving the camera, we'll feel that point of emphasis. And you'll see that in movies all the time, is that rather than cutting to another angle, we punch in. All right, whoa, we got to pay attention to what's happening. We just punched in. So think about those rules as you're deciding where to put your camera. All right, I actually already said that. So yeah, so think, give yourself those options, but experiment and have fun as well. All right, so I think, scheduling. And so I'll show you a little bit about this when we look at the scheduler. But some of the tips when we try to schedule a film is that we try to group locations, right? So whenever possible, you want to get all of our work done in one location before moving to another location. You don't want to move your crew back and forth between locations a whole bunch. That's a waste of time. Generally speaking, and again, there are certainly exceptions to these rules. Generally speaking, you might try to do exteriors before interiors, and one of the reasons for that is like weather. So for instance, if you have scheduled your exteriors first and you have interiors that are available, if you do get a rain day, the weather is terrible and you need to go inside for some reason, you can do that. But if you shot all of your interiors first and then you have your exteriors scheduled, but it rains, well, we have nothing else to shoot. We've done all our interiors. We can't do any more interior shots, that means it's the canceled shoot day. So that's one of the reasons why you try to sort of move in from exterior to interior. It also gives your time, your art department or anyone who's working for you to prep that other set. You might have people pre-lighting interiors, those kinds of things might be going on as well. Generally speaking, you'll shoot day towards night. In a feature film, for instance, right? If you have night scenes, those night scenes are all going to end up getting grouped together. So your film is going to end up kind of moving from day shoots to day and evening shoots to day and night shoots to entirely night shoots. And you're going to slowly have to work your crew to that point because obviously you're taking a physical toll on everybody's bodies. They're having to adjust now to working at night and sleeping during the day. And you're going to try to minimize that huge adjustment as much as you can. And it's easier to move from day to night than to kind of move from night to day. Again, you don't want to keep going back and forth either. You're not going to have like a day shoot and then a night shoot and a day shoot because now you've created complete havoc on everybody's bodies. So if you do have any night shooting, and day shooting, start Wednesday afternoon, get your day stuff, and then finish up Wednesday night, as opposed to trying to shoot Tuesday. No, don't shoot tonight and then try to pull your team together to shoot Wednesday morning, because that's going to be a lot more exhausting. Again, when you're scheduling your actual, didn't mean to do that. When you're scheduling your shot list, make sure you get all of one side of a scene before moving on. So meaning, you get your medium shot, your close up, any insert shots on one side of your set, and then turn around and get the other side. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. One, obviously in professional settings, you might have changes in set dressing, changes in lighting. You'll have a whole crew behind you, right, when shooting one angle, and so you have to move all of that to the other side to switch sides, and so you're not going to want to keep doing that. But even in a small setup where it's just you and an actor with what you're doing, it's just easier to get everything from one end and then switch gears to the other side. And give yourself enough time. Think about how long each shot is really going to take. So if you have, let's say you have a scene that is one page long, right? So that's a minute of screen time. Well, if you're getting a master shot and that scene is 1 minute, then okay, that master shot is going to be 1 minute, and you're going to do maybe 2 takes of that. So that's 2 minutes of filming. You also need the setup, and there's the time to cut, give your actor instructions, record again. Then you're going to get the close-ups or medium shots that are in that scene. So you might shoot a 1 minute scene 10, 20 times total between all the different shots and takes you're going to do. So now that 1 minute becomes 20 minutes plus the setup time and the speaking between shots. So make sure you give yourself that time as you're scheduling your shoot. Think about how many takes am I going to do for each shot? How much of each scene does each shot cover? How much time do I need to set up between takes? How much time do I want to give my actors to prepare? All of that kind of stuff as you're planning. All right, so we're gonna hop into Celtics, but any general questions as I move from PowerPoint to the Celtics to show you how to do some of these things? It doesn't seem like there's any questions right now.
Quiet group today. Did we intimidate them yesterday, or is
Another big
everyone
information
still
dump,
recovering from their all-nighter to write their script?
yeah. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share Celtics. I'm going to go back to the little demo script that I did. I'm actually going to see if I can delete this image here. Can I delete this? Actually don't want this thing. No, media. There we go. All right. So when you are in your script tool, your script editor, on the side of your screen, you have your menu of options here, and we talked about I think the title, showed you the title page. We showed you media comments, all that. Now we're going to go into the breakdown and the shot list. And so the first thing we're going to go to is the breakdown. All right, so first of all, you can see I already have characters in my breakdown, and that's because Celtics is smart enough to recognize speaking roles. And so it knows that Greg and Kate are designated in the by the character cues that are in the scene, and so it's marked them in there. And it's smart enough actually to recognize that Kate's mom is a voiceover, so she does not actually have to be on set when we're filming this scene. So it's smart enough to do that. That being said, what Celtics is not smart enough to do is to recognize when characters appear in the scene text but aren't speaking. So you do need to pay attention carefully to any characters that are in your scene text and don't appear in, don't speak in the scene. So I'm going to actually write someone in just so that we have an example. So I'm actually going to go out of my breakdown for a second here. So I had Coco the gorilla, but she's going to be an animal. So I'm going to add another character. Sits on the couch watching a rerun of How I Met Your Mother. Oops, let me get out of the italics here. With, I don't want bold either. What's going on here? There we go. With Sally, Kate's daughter. Okay, there we go. So now we have another character. So let's see what happens when we go to breakdown. I don't think it's smart enough to recognize it. Nope. Okay. So now we know we have another character to add to our breakdown. We're going to have to manually do that. So all you have to do is you go with your cursor, double click on Sally, and you're going to go to the drop down menu to character, and you click tag. And now Sally is in the scene. And you're going to do this from the top of your script, go through and identify everything, every detail you need to break down. So for instance, IKEA furniture. I'm going to highlight that. It's going to come up here. Well, that's not a character. It's set dressing. So I'm going to go down here to set dressing. Click that. The other thing that's nice is once you've gone through a whole script, if you have key items, they'll show up in this existing item, and that you don't have to keep writing in new things. You connect them so that in the catalog of all the things that you've broken down, like for instance, a particular prop is connected throughout the entire film. So you don't have to keep creating different props. It tells you this is the prop throughout the entire film. We said Coco the gorilla. So we need a 200-pound lowland gorilla. That's going to be an animal. We have keys. So this is a prop. And as you can see, as you go through, these things all start getting listed in your breakdown on the right. And so you're going to want to go through this process and make sure you capture all of it. So right arm is a cybernetic chrome plated and full of blinking lights. So this could be a number of things, right? So this could be a prop arm. It might be something that she's wearing over her arm, might be makeup, or it could be visual effects. And so you might need to, you might have a decision about how you're gonna do that. I'm gonna say right now, like, okay, this is gonna be a CGI, or let's see, do you have VFX in here? Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna put CGI for VFX, and I'm gonna say this is gonna be something we're gonna do in post. But you might do it a different way. The other thing is, if you're not sure, if you're like, I'm not 100% sure what this is, I can, let's see, I can do here is I can also highlight it again, and I can do production note, I think is the option here, production notes, right? And I can tag there and say, all right, I'm gonna make a note here that I'm not 100% sure how we're gonna do this. I need to meet with the director and other people on the team and find out, all right, so how are we doing the cybernetic arm? Is that gonna be a practical effect? Is it gonna be a optical effect, a CGI effect? Is this gonna be something she's wearing? Is it gonna be makeup? All these kinds of things. And we can ask about how that needs to be done, even if we don't know for sure how we're gonna categorize it right now. We have a phone, right? So that would be a prop. But you might, here I just highlight it's a phone, but again, here's where you need to be a little smarter than Celtics is you don't want to tag all phones as simply phone, because then when you're looking at your breakdown sheet, all you're gonna see is, oh, I need a phone in this scene. But it's a specific phone, right? It's Kate's phone. So you want to make sure that you clarify when making your breakdown that this is Kate's phone. So Kate does have a phone in this scene. And because your film might have any number of phones, and you need to make sure that you have the right one on set on that day. So any questions about how this works as I'm demonstrating this for you? The other thing we have is dramatic day in Celtics, and that's really useful for continuity. And so when you, and like for instance with wardrobe, oftentimes screenplays, unless it's really specific wardrobe, you won't see any reference to what characters are wearing and scene to scene. And so that's actually something that your costume designer and wardrobe supervisor are gonna have to figure out, right? Is how many outfits are these people wearing? And so it can be really useful to designate all the different dramatic days, meaning this is dramatic day 1. And if there's another scene that's at, exterior or interior house night, and then the next day is another day, well, we know that now that there's been a night and a day, it's probably a dramatic day 2 now, unless there's a flashback to the first day. We're now on a second dramatic day, meaning probably that's going to be new outfits for all the characters, and also tracking things like makeup or hair. If a character is if there's some sort of changing of their hair as they go through the story, or it's an action film and they're getting a little beat up and their clothes are getting tattered throughout the scene, throughout the film. By looking at the dramatic days, when you're planning, you can say, oh, wait a minute, even though yesterday we were filming dramatic day 5 and his shirt was all tattered, today we're shooting another scene from dramatic day 1. We need the pristine shirt. We got to go get that other shirt that matches, that's still nice and pristine. So that dramatic day is really useful to help you keep track of some of those kinds of details. All right, so I'm just going to do here, let's see, I'm going to do Coco as an animal, just so I have something in the second scene, and then a unicycle. I'm going to call that a vehicle, even though it probably should be a prop. I don't know. I have to ask Gary how he would categorize a unicycle. All right, so that's your breakdown. Now I'm going to show you a couple different, so one, you can see a breakdown report here, and it shows you, again, everything that's needed for a scene. But if we go back out of the script editor tool, we can go down to, I'm going to show you a couple different places where you can see what you're doing. There's the catalog, and you can also see everything by category. So for instance, if you're breaking down a full script and you want to see all of your props, you can see all the props here, and you can also click on a prop and find out all the scenes, how many scenes that prop is in. You can add a picture of that prop. You can make notes about the prop. So for instance, if it's a loan or something, you can put the address and contact information for who owns the prop. You can also put in information about the cost of the prop, you know, how much the prop is going to cost you. Let's see here. Let's go back to this page. No. There we go. And then same thing with your actors. You can see how many scenes they're going to be in and all of that in your catalog. You all won't really need to use your catalog much, but what we are going to look at is the scheduling tool. So more, you know, you might have more than 2 scenes. It's not very hard to schedule a 2-scene script, but when you're scheduling your film, you can add day breaks. So I'm going to add a day break, and you just drag your end of day, and you know, if you're going to be shooting all on Wednesday, then you only need 1 day break, and you can pick up your scenes and shuffle them in the order that you'll shoot the scenes. And again, I would organize things like if you have interiors and exteriors, group your exteriors together, group your interiors together, group your locations together, all of that kind of thing. And what that allows us to do now is also to create some other kinds of reports, like a breakdown sheet report will show us everything that's needed per a day. And so if you were shooting a bigger short film where you're going to be shooting for multiple days, or like a feature or TV series, this allows you to see everything you need on a given shoot day. So we'll know, okay, we need the animal. And actually, you see, I made a mistake here because I tagged Coco 2 different ways. I should have when I tagged Coco that second time, I should have highlighted the existing animal so that they got linked. So that gives you a good example of why you need to pay attention when you're tagging, because if you already tagged something once somewhere else in the script, you want to make sure that when you tag it later in another scene, you link it to that original thing, because now it looks in your breakdown like you have 2 different animals that are needed, but it's actually the same animal. So be careful about that kind of thing. So that's breaking down. You can also do call sheets in here. We're not really going into call sheets because that's not something you all will need. But my students learn to do call sheets, and call sheets help you get all of your crew organized and know when to show up for your shoot, and lets you know the schedule of your day and organize when your cast comes in and all that kind of stuff. And you can add notes to the different departments, and those are really useful and something that goes out to the entire crew each day of a professional shoot, but you all probably will not need to deal with that. All right, so now I'm going to go back and show you the shot listing tool. Which again, you can also access just from your script editor. You don't have to go out to access this. But when you're doing your shot list, you simply go click on the scene that you're on, and you start adding shots that you want to grab. So you can say, all right, this is going to be a master shot, right? And you can say it's going to be a wide angle. I can designate whether or not there's movement. I'm going to say no, static. I'm going to say this is going to just be on a tripod. And then I can put in there that, you know, Kate, Greg, and what her name? I think it was Sally. I guess I'll put Coco, even though Coco is not really Cash, she's an animal. If I want to do a special angle, I can say it's a high angle, low angle, or a POV. I'm just going to leave that blank. And now I have my master shot in there. And I can go in here and I can add, all right, so I'm going to do medium shot on Kate. I'm going to say this one's going to be handheld. Now, there are better tools out there than Celtics for doing this kind of thing that are a little more innovative and will sort of kind of, you can import a script into something and it'll like draw out some of the information. But I think this is a decent shot list tool for someone who's just getting started, just to collect your ideas about a shot. So when you, let's look at it. So this gives you a view of the shots that you've planned so far. And then going back to that other, when we were looking at the schedule, I'm going to go back to the home page. When you go to schedule and click on this right-hand side that says call sheets and reports, you can click on shot lists, and it'll also break down the shots by day. So you can see all the shots you need by the day that you are shooting. So that's another kind of useful tool to be able to print out your shot list and see everything that you need to get done. And as you're going through and shooting the project, you can, if you have this printout, you can scratch out what you did, what you got. You can make notes on it about, oh, actually I changed this. Instead of doing a medium shot, I decided just to go for the close up. If you add shots, you can kind of note that in there. But I think this is a really useful tool as a starting point. So what we're going to have you do in your break time today between our closing of this session and coming in to Kurt's session is go through and do your shot list for your script, and just go through and think about like what are the different angles and pieces of coverage that I want to get. You can obviously keep changing that and developing it. I don't expect you to be done in 2 hours and say this is the end all be all shot list that I'm definitely going to use, but just get some ideas so that when you come back with Kurt and he's going to talk some about composition, you can even ask some questions about your shot list. You can say like, hey, now that I've done my shot list, I realize I have this scene and I want to cover this. Do you have any tips or ideas about how I might get that? What should I think about in terms of the composition? So that way we can have some discussion about some real examples. So any questions about some of these software tools? Again, keep in mind that Caltech does have these little help center. There's a blog. There's lots of places to find guides on things that are usually pretty good. So if you just search in the help section for information about what you're trying to do, you can usually find your answer if you get a little lost going through here. But most of this is accessible through the screenplay editor. You can't get to the schedule that way, but you can get to your breakdown and your shot list right there on the side. Just click that and you can go to shot list. And click back on it and it goes back out to your script editor. Click that, breakdown, or you can go right back to your script editor. But in order to do the scheduling part, you have to go back out to that main home page. And again, it's going to be under the shoot tab. You have write, plan, and shoot, and that's where you find your schedule button.
I think an important thing to note with all of this is we're showing you all of the tools that professionals use and how to make a really professional shoot. But if you're just making something for Instagram or something, for YouTube to throw up there as just a fun thing, you don't necessarily have to do a full script. You don't have to map out your shots. You can grab your camera and go for as much professional or just on the fly shooting as you want. This is to give you a context, an idea of this is how people work on creating films. This is the process behind how a screenwriter then creates something that goes on to a director, and they develop a cast, and there's a producer, and all of these different components come together to try to showcase a high quality film. There's a lot of little elements that go into it. And so whether you're going to use this or not going forward beyond this week is totally up to you. But at least now you know that this is the process with how people put together films.
Yeah, and I can tell you in the Digital Summit program, for instance, our students in our Digital Cinema production class, which is the first sort of short film production class where we go through this entire process that we've been going through here, they have to do every single step of this before they're allowed to go out and shoot. So we look at their breakdown, we look at their schedule, we look at call sheets, we look at their shot lists. We want to make sure they've done all that planning, and they can't check out gear until they've done that that planning. Because in professional production, right? If definitely I agree 100% with Kurt when you're doing things like social media shoots and things like that. But anything that's on a scale, with crew and money on the line, that preparation is so essential to not wasting money, to not creating dangerous situations, all that kind of stuff. That we really put our students through the ringer of like, all right, you're going to go through every step, and we're going to vet every step and make sure that you're doing it the right way, so that we know that you're actually prepared, that you're not just going to go out there and wing it. And again, like I said, people have gotten hurt and died in filmmaking. And so to me, a lot of this of making sure our students go through this process is about safety and making sure that I can trust the people that we're sending out there. They're taking expensive equipment and they're taking human lives, and they've done the homework to know that, yes, you're going to do this responsibly and safely, and we trust you. So that's one of the reasons why we make sure that our students do every one of these steps. All right, so if there aren't any other questions about the software, I think we're ready to kick it over to our guest, Gary Kaut. Gary is a producer, production manager, and assistant director, which means that breakdowns and schedules are his bread and butter. He does this kind of stuff all the time for shoots of all levels, from commercials to television to feature films to documentaries. And I think we'd love to have Gary kind of start off by just telling us a little bit about his career and his experience, and then have you all ask specific questions about, how do you think through some of the logistical challenges, and maybe ask him questions drawing from the scripts that you've written now. What are some of the things that you've written down and you're thinking, all right, how do I solve these logistical challenges? So welcome, Gary. I'll take the slide down so that we can see you bigger.
Yes, not too big. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the fun and complex world of filmmaking. And hopefully it is fun for everyone, no matter what level that you're working at. Like Andrew said, I am a producer, line producer, assistant director, production manager. There's a lot of titles that I do all interchangeably. And they all have something to do with the producing side of filmmaking, which is, to me, I feel a super important integral part of the process. It isn't the screenwriting side of it. I have written screenplays, and I've certainly read a lot of screenplays, and I have done what Andrew was showing you earlier, which is breaking down screenplays. But writing screenplays is not my strong suit. I'm not a director, although I've directed a few small things. I'm not a camera person, I'm not a cinematographer. So I am on the logistical side, the management side, the planning, the money side, the financials, the schedules. So all the things that, in my mind, kind of take the idea of what you want to make, and it overlaps it with the reality of what you have to work with, whether that's the amount of money that you have, the amount of time that you have, the amount of resources that you have. And, it's such a drastic scale. And if you approach it with the right way, a lot of what Andrew was talking about, and then what Kurt kind of threw in at the end, that there's really such an incredible range of what you can achieve. And a lot of that comes from the planning side. And again, that's where a lot of my work is done. In fact, what I like to say is if I have done my job correctly, which is preparing for the shoot itself, then I have the least to do on the actual shoot days. If I'm the actual assistant director, then I have a very hands-on role on the shoot days, and that's just to basically push the day itself forward. But like Andrew was talking about, something, the example of like the cell phone, the phone. If you have a phone written into a script, and everywhere in the script, it's all it says is phone, and then you do your breakdown, and you don't realize that every character has a different phone, and one person you want to have an HTC, and one person you want to have an Apple phone, and one person for some reason still has an old flip phone, that you got to have it all mapped out so that on the day you spend the least amount of time frantically trying to figure out which phone it is and where it is, and instead you've got it all, you all planned ahead of time. So for me, my job, most of it happens leading up to the shoot itself, and then it's time for everyone else to do their job. Now, I am fortunate in my career that I've done a lot of shoots where there are a lot of people involved. I've had shoots upwards of 50, 60, 70 people on the crew on a day, and everybody has their own job to do. And the way I describe it, the way I describe filmmaking sometimes to a location owner that has never hosted a film shoot before, whether that's like an office or a restaurant or a homeowner, is to say that from the outside, it will seem like total chaos. It will seem like there are so many people doing so many different things, but the beauty of it is that there's an interactivity to everything. And people on a film crew know what their job is. They know what other people's job is. They don't necessarily know how to do it. Like me, I don't know how to do everyone's job, but I know what their job is. So everybody works together. In a way, it's like ants. It's, ants are moving around and they all have a focus. They all know what to do. They're all walking right by each other and just narrowly missing each other. And that's kind of what we do on a film set. Now, on a smaller shoot, again, I think all of that can just be mapped onto something smaller. So more people are going to wear more hats. So your makeup person could also be your wardrobe person, and your camera person is also going to be your lighting person, and your craft service person is also going to be your location manager, and that's all okay. The important thing to me is to know that all of these things are necessary components of a film shoot: the locations, the lighting, the craft service, the sound, the hair, the makeup, the wardrobe, the art department. These are all necessary components, and tackling each one, being aware that they all have needs that have to be thought through, have to be planned for, and then have to be taken care of on a shoot day. That is what is going to make your shoot day successful. And it doesn't matter if you're doing all of it or you have one person to do each different thing. So for me, because I'm not the director and I'm not the cameraman and I'm not the editor, then I sometimes think to myself, when do I get to make a movie? Like, am I a filmmaker? If I'm just a guy who breaks down the script or figures out how much it's going to cost, and I definitely feel that I'm a filmmaker because I'm always keeping the final result at the top of my mind. I'm always trying to think about, well, what does this scene mean? And what is the director trying to say? What is the cameraman trying to create in the scene with lighting and lens and camera placement and camera movement? So all of the feet on the ground logistical things that I have to figure out, I always measure them up against what is the intent of what we're going for here. Because I could just, as the person who knows what the budget is and knows how much time we have, I could just say, nope, not enough time. Nope, not enough money. But if I think about, well, what's the goal of what they want to do? What's the intent? Then I can say, because of my filmmaking side to myself, I've been making movies since 6th grade. It was the first movie I made. And of course, back then I was doing everything. Or in high school with a couple buddies, we were doing everything. Um, and that is to think of the solution or think about how to use the resources that we have so that we can still accomplish our creative goal, but we can actually do it, because there's nothing worse than setting out to make a film and not respecting the on the ground reality, the time, the money, the resources, and then you don't finish because you kind of didn't plan appropriately, or you do finish and it just isn't quite what you were hoping for. So that's an unfortunate result to too many productions, and sometimes you have to dial it back. I mean, I hate to say it, but sometimes you have to dial it back. I was actually just reading an article today in Movie Maker magazine about it was an interview with the director of photography, Miranda July's latest film, and it's interesting how the cinematographer, he says in the interview, well before we started making the movie, the director and I were having conversations, and she called me about the script, and we talked about some ways to approach things visually. And he literally says, we realize that now is the time to come up with ideas before somebody starts telling us how much time and money we have. And by doing that, they actually then had time to figure out, well, how can we accomplish that with the time and money that we have? And he follows that up by saying, but if we had kind of thought of that 3 days before the shoot day, if we hadn't sat down and decided to talk through this particular scene or how to approach it, well, then there's no way we would have been able to do it the way we would have preferred to do it, the way we dreamed of doing it, because we didn't give ourselves the time to plan appropriately. So a lot of people will say to me, well, how soon do you need to start? How soon do you need to start doing these things? It sounds like you wrote the script last night, you're shooting tomorrow. So there's not a lot of time. And that's fine, because the scope seems small, and you've written it to take place in the house. So hopefully everything written into the script is there. But I still think there's time to think about some of these things in the smaller context. So again, going back to the idea of I'm a filmmaker, when I break down a script, when I schedule it, and then when I budget it, and that's kind of the order in which you need to go in to do it right. Because you can't budget it until you know how many actors you actually need and how long each of them is going to work and how long you need a location. And you can't know those things until you break the script down into its component parts and then build a schedule out of it. But to me, I feel like that is one of the times you make the movie. Everybody thinks making the movie is pulling out the cameras and having the actors stand in front and film, and probably including the post-production process. But I think that the movie also, in a different way, gets made in the pre-production process. You literally go through it from beginning to end, and you think through everything you need to do. And in your mind and on paper, whether that's grids, like an Excel spreadsheet grid, or a calendar program, or handwritten notes, whatever it is, you kind of have your blueprint for how you're going to make this movie. And so in the way you made it. Now the finished result is different because people can't sit down and look at it on a screen, but somebody could conceivably look through your notes and go through scene by scene all of your breakdown and sort of get an idea of what this movie is going to look like. So it's that sort of planning that is going to help ensure that you have the most successful shoot you can have. There's always going to be stuff that comes up, so you got to leave room for that. The more ready you are for everything you can control, the more time and energy and ability and bandwidth that you have to deal with the things that suddenly come up, because things will. Weather will change. The like Andrew said, the neighbor next door will suddenly decide to mow their lawn. So yeah, so that's my pitch for thinking things through, for putting on your producer hat, your production manager hat, your assistant director hat, and make that movie on paper and in your mind before you start to commit it to film.
So, Gary, yesterday, day one was filled with a lot of brainstorming for story ideas and figuring out how to kind of compile a story to tell. And we had some great ideas from the people involved, but some of them came with certain logistics issues that need to be thought out. Like I think it was Joni wanted to do something with a bicycle. So does she mount her camera or her phone on her bike? Does she have someone drive in a car in front of her and film from behind? Does she set up a tripod and ride by it? How do you go about kind of figuring out some of those pre-production planning steps in terms of what's the best way to present something when it isn't detailed out in the script like that?
Well, on a big shoot, one where you're not doing everything yourself, you reach out to your creative collaborators. I think that's one of the best ways that you can plan. And as far in advance, of course, as makes sense. Sometimes you can't talk to somebody until they're on payroll, so maybe that's only a few days, maybe it's a few weeks ahead of time. And you look at the scene and you say, so this is a bike scene, and how do I want to approach it? Now, there's creative discussions to be had in a sense first. So you would say, well, is the character going to be going through an emotional experience while they're riding the bike? Because if they are, then you're going to want to see their face. So, okay, so you say, okay, well, I want to see their face. So if I set up a tripod on the side of the street and I point it down the street and they come riding towards camera and then they ride past and I pan with it, well, you're not going to see their face for very long at all. Certainly not long enough to have the character go through an emotional experience or to exude an emotion or to change an emotion. So that says, okay, we'll throw that one out. Unfortunately, that's also probably the easiest one to do, but it doesn't fit your narrative need. Now, if this was simply a scene to show that a character is going from her house to her friend's house and there's no emotion, you just want to show journey, you just want to show passage of time, well, then setting it up on a tripod and panning as they go past is the perfect solution. It's easy to shoot, it's quick. You don't need to be out in the street. You could set your camera up on the curb or sidewalk, which is safe, going back to the idea that everybody wants to go home at the end of a shoot day in one piece. It's very important. And then your person on the bike rides through. But you don't want that, so that's out. So then you go, okay, well, we could lead them with a car, and I've done that. We get a minivan or a hatchback, and you put the person in the back and raise the door and hold the camera, and along comes the person, and you just track with each other. It is kind of a step up in terms of safety, so you want to think that through. You might want to tie the person into the back just in case for some reason the car has to stop or accelerate or something, and person gets thrown around. So I have tied people into the back of trunks. I've tied people onto the back of pickup trucks using bungees. Nothing that'll cinch them too hard. There's even harnesses.
Don't do this at home, kids.
No?
I said, don't do this at home, kids.
Yeah. But be safe about it. We do it, right? That's independent filmmaking. That's low budget filmmaking. That's weekend filmmaking. You do it, but it doesn't mean you can't do it still as safely as possible. Speed, fortunately, you're talking about a bike. It's not a motorcycle. You're not going 50 miles an hour. And the great thing is, speed can be enhanced or decreased, the sense of speed, by lens choice. So if you want to increase the sense of speed, again, not a cinematographer, which one do I want? You want wide angle. No, what do you want? You want long lens? You want to feel the sense of movement versus like staying in place. Practice it, test it out. So that'll help again. So it's like if you don't want to go that fast, but you want to feel maybe a little faster than it is, then experiment with your lens, whether you're going to go long lens or wide angle lens. And then pick a street that doesn't have a lot of traffic and shoot it. But then you think, well, it's bouncing around and I can't quite see their face well enough. So I'm not really getting that sense of emotion that I want. And then you go, gosh, well, maybe we should mount the camera onto the handlebars, because then we're probably likely to get a much more, stable, might not be, depends on the road and how bumpy it is and the bike, but, you'll probably at least kind of be on their face. And then you got to think, well, gosh, my camera's this big, but can I shoot this with a GoPro? Can I shoot this with an iPhone? There's plenty of mounts out there that you can get. You could probably jury rig something to work. I've had to do that on the fly on a shoot. But again, that's the kind of thing, like if you think this through, just like the conversation I have just had with myself, but you have it with yourself or you have it with your cinematographer, then you'll have hit upon the solution. You'll have had a little bit of time, a day or two or a week or whatever you need to go buy it or borrow it or order it from Amazon. And then you have the gear that you need to accomplish the shot that you want without slowing down your day. And so that would be the process on how do you plan for a shot to shoot somebody on a bicycle.
Joni, did you catch all that?
Yeah, that's super helpful, especially the part about the emotions, because I think I do want it to be kind of emotion forward and like more facial acting and expressions acting than any specific dialogue or narrative, really. I guess, yeah, I want it to be light on narrative. So that's really helpful. I'm still trying to figure out how to do it just in a quarantine situation where it's mostly only me. One question I did have too for you is, in a situation where it's not just you and you have the luxury of a larger crew, could you help me understand and differentiate between the AD, the production manager, and the producer?
Sure. So the producer is responsible for everything. They just take a really 10,000-foot view of the entire production. And it's kind of the position, one of those positions where the buck stops with them. And I would differentiate that from the director, where the director is the, to pull a term out of different business. The director would be the chief creative officer. So everything creative kind of stops with the director. The director is responsible for making all the creative decisions, to know everything about the film creatively. If somebody has a suggestion, and some directors welcome suggestions, they take it to the director. The director still has the ultimate decision. Costume designer says, I think this character should wear red. The director can say, I totally agree. The producer is the chief operating officer. So the producer is responsible for, the personnel that get hired and the process, making sure the calendars are adhered to, making the calendar, keeping everybody on task. The director is going to be, oftentimes as creatives, they don't think in this way. Our brains are wired a little differently. So they're going to be focused really on what's going to happen on set. And the producer has to focus also on what happens offset. They have to kind of think about both. And like I talked about earlier, they have to put everything in the context of serving the needs of the film, which is often synonymous with serving the needs of the director, which is why there's a lot of producer directors out there, and they are very good at gathering the troops, at motivating people, at thinking through logistics. Obviously, on a big shoot, they have people below them that kind of pick up where they leave off and tackle the minutia. But then they can switch gears and go into directing. When you have somebody who's a director, but not so much a producer, but they're taking on that role, then the shoot can be a little chaotic and whatnot. So the producer is the top of the ladder, head of the pyramid on the management, coordination, logistical side. Under the producer is the production manager. So the production manager, the way I look at it is the set is like this bubble, right? And it can literally have physical boundaries. It could be, the house that you're shooting in. And the creativity side of things happen where the camera is, in and around where the camera is pointing and where the actors are. So that's what the costume designer is going to be thinking about. That's what the cinematographer is going to be thinking about. That's what the director is going to be thinking about. But who's thinking about the bathrooms? Who's thinking about where do we park everybody? Who's thinking about where are we going to feed lunch? Where are we going to get lunch? When is lunch? Who's thinking about, oh, I got to call the location tomorrow, which is a restaurant, and let them know what time we're going to get there? Well, the cinematographer is not going to do that. The director is not going to do that. And the producer may be off trying to, get casting locked in and, maybe some other things. So the production manager is really thinking, managing the production. And so they are picking up outside of that bubble. Everything outside of that bubble of the set is now what the production manager needs to be thinking about. And they need to be thinking about it, not in terms of servicing the creative ideas, but making sure that the people who are creatively making the film don't have to worry about anything else. They don't have to worry about where lunch is coming from. They don't have to worry about where to park. They can just drive up and somebody's going to go park over there, or they emailed them a map the day before. So you are trying to make the set the most worry-free, stress-free, logistically smooth experience you can for the people making the movie. The assistant director is sort of the production manager's proxy within the set bubble, right? So we have our set bubble, and the production manager is outside the set bubble. The assistant director is inside the set bubble. So the assistant director is making sure that everything on set is now also happening as smoothly as possible. Okay, we're going to be shooting this scene now, but the next scene is with another actor. Is that actor here? Is that actor in makeup? Because we're going to need them in about 30 minutes. Okay, so they're making sure that that actor is getting ready so they don't have to wait for him. That person is kind of helping traffic cop the set. So that person is saying, action sometimes for the director. They're saying cut. They're saying back to one, which means let's reset. We're going to do it again. They are watching their clock, right? They're going to be like, okay, we've got 20 minutes until the next scene. So we've got 20 minutes to go. And then when that 20 minutes is up in a heartbeat, because time moves like lightning on a set, then they're going to have to make the decision. I'll let the director go another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes, because I think we can save the time on the next scene, because the actor is already just waiting in the wings, he's ready to go, we can go, go, go. So the assistant director is kind of the on-set traffic cop, timekeeper, and they are assisting the director. So again, just like everything, their job is to do all of this in the context of getting it done, of serving the needs of the creatives, and in particular, the director. Before you get to the shoot, that person will help write up the shooting schedule. So they'll talk to the director about shots, they'll talk to the VP about shots, and they'll say, how many shots do you want for this? Usually this is done days in advance, hopefully. And so they can map it out. They can say, okay, first shot from 9 a.m. to 9:15, second shot, we're going to change the camera, that's going to take 15 minutes, and then so we've got now 9:30 to 9:45 for the next shot. So they map it out, they can adhere to that. What else? I might think about for AD. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So, hopefully one of the things that I've helped kind of realize in describing these three positions is that everybody works together as a team. Everybody kind of has to, fit together. It's dovetailing. It's where does my duties leave off, and who's there to kind of pick it up and take it, into that bubble of the set or carry it over to the next day. It's communication. Communication between the producer, the production manager, and the AD. That communication between producer, production manager, and AD is as integral as the communication between, let's say, the director, the production designer, and the cinematographer.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Do we have other questions out there for Gary, or if you have a question about some of what we covered so far that you just kind of need recapped or clarified? I realize we've gotten into a lot of the nitty gritty details of here's how you structure everything, and everyone's probably getting antsy, like I just want to go out and film stuff now. When can I actually grab a camera and go do something? But it's important to know this stuff in advance, because the better you can plan something out, the overall the better things are going to be, especially when we're doing something in just 1 week. This is very much so intentionally, well, we're not intending to stress everyone out, but it is a rushed process. Normally you wouldn't be doing a video in such a short time frame, but we want to keep everything to 1 week as a crash course to show you here's what goes into making films, and that you can make films from home. So Mary Jane, Nolan, Joni, Nick and Jenny, Clem, and anyone curious about some of what we've covered or have a question for Gary?
I don't.
Thinking here.
I think
There's
that
a question in formulation.
Yeah, I think that distinction between the roles was my big question that I was going to ask. So I'm glad you covered that. I'm trying to think more specifically about like our script, and see if there's anything I would want to ask you about. I guess the scheduling conundrum that I'm running up against at the moment is that I want to get at least 2 shots of a phone screen at specific times. So I'm thinking about how we shoot those scenes at that specific time at like 7 p.m. and how that works with the rest of the shooting schedule. I think I can make it work, but that's just what's on my mind for the sake of filling space.
And is that because you want to see the time on the phone? And of course, all of our phones now are set by the internet and its cellular connection.
Yeah.
It changed the time on your phone. You can change the time on your phone. It may be worth helping out your shooting schedule by just, trying to do a quick Google search on how do I change the time on my phone, or how do I make my phone say a certain time? And it may be a combination of turn off your Wi-Fi, turn off your cellular. There may even be a program. I mean, because I've shot a lot of stuff for tech companies, and we often have to make a screen look a particular way. So we have internal apps that the tech company has come up with that allow us to control. I mean, it's kind of crazy, actually. We can change the signal strength on your Wi-Fi indicator. We can change what cellular carrier shows up in the top menu bar. We can make all that disappear. We can certainly change the time. So there may be like a little app, a little hack or something that you could do. And it's worth checking it, because then you won't be a slave to that time to get that exact shot. Like, oh my God, we missed it, kind of thing.
Nick, I'm looking at Google Play right now. I'm not sure if you have an iPhone or Android, but there are at least 20 apps I'm seeing for what I just searched, fake clock. And there's a edit clock, there's a adjustable clock. So they just look for a free app that you can download that is a clock that allows you to adjust the time, and then you could shoot it anytime that you want.
And let's say Nick, if it doesn't give you exactly what you want, because sometimes it, like Kirk said, it may actually rewrite your interface. It's really a screen. It's a fake screen. So it won't necessarily look exactly like Apple's interface or whatever. But that's fine. If you actually notice when you watch movies, a lot of screens on phones and movies don't look like any screen you've ever seen. It certainly doesn't look like your phone. And part of that is copyright issues. And the other one is so that they can just make it say what they want it to say. So they design it. You could do it as a photograph and then go full screen, just pull it up as a photo, right? And then it's totally fake. If all of that fails, set an alarm. If you want it to be 7 p.m., then set an alarm at 6:40. 6:50 and 6:55 on your phones, just basically counting down to that 7 o'clock shot. So you
Okay.
are totally ready.
Okay. Yeah, that might work. If I guess what I might end up doing is just like going into Photoshop or something and making my own fake lock screen, because part of it is like the time and then part of it is that I want to have like texts show up on it. Yeah, we can fake it though. It'll be fine. Thank you.
You you could very easily probably just do a screen grab of your phone tonight when you get to that exact time that you want to capture. That way you're getting your actual phone face at the exact time, and then you can play with it in Photoshop beyond that.
Yeah.
Another
Okay.
great. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. So
Anyone else want to chime in with a question for Gary? Otherwise, we'll probably just start sharing some war stories about some of the things that we've gone through. Um, Gary was talking a little bit about safety and some odd things. That the most precarious shot that I ever had was I was filming hang gliders taking off, and I was lowered over the side of a cliff on a rope looking up so I could get a shot of the hang gliders taking off up above me. And the guy holding the rope kept saying, "Whatever you do, don't drop the camera." And I kept yelling back, "Whatever you do, don't drop me." Screw the camera. I'll just hang on to the rope, man.
Yeah.
Gary, I have a question. Is the producer, like you said, they're responsible for everything? Are they also usually the person who's like fundraising and like trying to win grants or get sponsors and funders or whatever?
They can be, for sure. They typically, the producer is not the person who provides the money themselves. In independent filmmaking, when somebody gives, $5,000, $50,000, $500,000, and they'll often get an executive producer credit. Sometimes investors don't get even credits at all. For movies that are going for things like crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, they're going for grants, and those kinds of things, then definitely the producer is going to be involved in that. It's a pretty expansive role, and it's one of the. It's a little frustrating, to be honest, sometimes as a producer, because there are so many interpretations of what they do, and it's also an honorary title. So there's a lot of people who were very minimally involved or tangentially involved, and so they get a producer credit. Now, that doesn't always mean they get the producer credit. They may get co-producer, associate producer, coordinating producer, supervising producer, usually an honorary title for something like a project like yours. If somebody goes out and helps raise some money, then would be for like a co-producer or associate producer. But the producer, you can always tell, this is a little trick that people don't realize, especially when they make movies for the first time or independent films, is the credits. Credits are a good indication of someone's role on the film and how important they were, or what they brought, what their status maybe brought to the picture. And so there's something called the body of the film, and that is from the first frame of the story and to the last frame of the story. So not including credits, unless the credits overlap with images from the film. So the body of the film, again, story starts, story ends. The credits that are the closest to the body of the film, whether they're at the beginning or at the end, the credit that's the closest to the body of the film is always going to be the director. The credit that's second closest to the film, or I should say the producer credit that's closest to the body of the film, is going to be the main producer on that movie. And then all the associates and co's and even executives and co-executives are going to be further away from the body of the picture. So something to think about. I see a lot of small films where there's a producer and they get the first credit, and then comes costume, and then comes somebody else, and then comes director, and then comes co-producer, and then comes associate producer, and then the movie starts. And I just think, like, you know, it all should have been maybe slightly rearranged. So something to think about.
We haven't heard yet from Clem or Nolan or Mary Jane. If one of you three have a question.
I have a question about importing.
Okay.
I imported a script that I've written before. I decided I could use that by editing out parts. However, we imported it and it did it in a strange way, and I don't know how to fix it. Like the page breaks sometimes are in the middle of a page,
Okay.
and there's
Mary Jane,
Andrew,
if
you may want to take that on.
if you share the file with me, I can just share it to that email address I put in the chat, and I can access it and take a look.
oh, okay. I will do that. Thank you.
Clem or Nolan, we haven't heard from you, and I'm not sure who Hannah is down there. Hannah joined about halfway through the meeting today,
Hi.
but
Yeah, I'm Joni's partner, and I'm gonna be
oh, okay,
Joni, yeah, in their film. So I'm sitting in and
great,
listening. Yeah.
fantastic. We weren't quite sure who you were because you hadn't signed up, but that's fantastic. I mean, if you want to listen into this, that's great. If you want to get caught up. I posted the videos of yesterday's sessions as well on YouTube. So
Great.
if you forward me your email address, I will send you the links to everything. Or Joni can also forward those along. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and feel free to shoot me an email so that I have your info, and then
Great.
I can send you all of the stuff that we've covered so far, so that you can get caught up.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Gary, any other insight that you want to bestow upon our students that are probably eyes like this right now, trying to decipher everything that they need to do over the next couple days?
Well, just to let you know that after doing this for 30 years, I'm still like that. You know, when I get onto a set, there's an excitement, there's a nervousness, uh, there's a focus, but there's also a tremendous enjoyment. Sometimes it's a painful process, and once you're done and you've achieved something and you feel that sense of achievement and you like what you've made and other people like what you've made and you put it out there and you know put it online or host a screening or submit to festivals. I have to admit, maybe it's just me, but a lot of the difficult aspects of the process kind of go away. I sort of forget. I think maybe that's almost necessary because most of us dive right into the next project. And if we remembered too acutely how difficult the last one was, we wouldn't do it again. So you're not, you know, you're not. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not deficient. You're not cut out for this. That's not the case if this seems hard and overwhelming, because it is. And but when you make it through and you're done and you have that finished product, it just seems all worthwhile. And then you're ready to do it again.
You were one of our judges for our film festival this year, and thank you for doing that. So maybe you can also provide some insight, because I'm sure also people are thinking, oh man, how do I make a film look good, and how am I going to make this, presentable? Because everyone wants to do well, but for some being involved here, it's probably their first time that they've tried to actually film something and put it together. Others, I'm sure they've done a couple things, but just maybe explain some of the films that we had this year for the film festival, just as an example, in terms of everything from a high-end $500,000, maybe $1 million budget down to someone doing something with their phone, and you still look at it in terms of the film for its quality. In fact, you were one of the big proponents for a short little film that we watched yesterday called The Puzzle, which Lori made with just her phone and a headset. And we chose that film over films that had really big budgets that just because there was something about the puzzle that we liked, right? So the quality doesn't matter. You don't have to have a $20,000 camera, especially these days. Cell phones, the cameras are so good on cell phones. People are making films with just their phones.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a struggle between uh, quality and that more intangible measure of a film. You know, how did it affect you? How effective was it? How unique was it? How well did it achieve its goal? Which isn't always, you know, going to be measured by how good did it look, how good did it sound, how good were the actors. But it's, you know, but it's tough. Um, it's not so clear cut. Why the puzzle? You know, I think even its flaws endeared it more to me, to the point where actually I saw the constantly shifting edges of the puzzle because the camera wasn't locked down properly as adding something to it. You know, so maybe it was a happy accident in that sense. It sounds like the filmmaker actually wanted more of a stable um, uh, plate and and the puzzle not to shift around so much. But one of the things that I always feel is important in filmmaking, again, at some level, and even at the lowest levels, it's a collaborative medium. It's hierarchical, so don't mistake collaborative necessarily with, you know, completely egalitarian or democratic. It's not. It is hierarchical. It can still be harmonious and beautiful. And you know, you've probably heard more stories about people in Hollywood and on sets who are terrible people, but you know, there's just as many, if not more, stories of people who are wonderful people, and it can make for a great working environment. But the more important thing in terms of the quality of the finished product is to recognize, I think, to recognize where your skills are strongest and where your skills are not strongest, and then hire people who have stronger skills than you in a particular aspect. You can get better at things, certainly, and you may not know you're good at something until you try it, and unfortunately you may not know you're not good at something until you try it. But once you do know those, you do know this on both sides, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this, then look for people within your filmmaking circle, your community, and if you have a budget, then you know you can look even further afield. You can look out in the entire valley. You could look all over the state. You could look all over the country, and to find the person that you know is going to do a better job than you will, but also has the right sensitivity, has worked on the same kinds of projects that you like. It doesn't mean that people don't have a range, but sometimes you got to kind of see it to believe it, right? So I like the way this person shoots. I like these films that they've worked on before, and they seem similar to the kind of film that I have done. I am not a great shooter. I don't have a great eye. I don't understand why a 50 millimeter lens is different than a 35 millimeter lens. So you find the person who does and collaborate.
Terrific. We're coming up on the noon hour. I'm sure people are hungry, and they also have some homework to do before we come back for our 2 o'clock session, where we will be learning about cinematography and lighting, and we'll have another guest to join us. But any final words of encouragement, Gary, for all of our folks who are joining us?
Well, again, just have fun, and just keep that, you know, keep everything light. and joyful, and but focus and work hard. I do see a quick picture, a quick question popped up
Yep.
from Nick. Is there an ideal finish time for a film in a film festival? No, but there is an ideal time for your film, which is as long as it feels as it needs to be without being any longer. So that's something you just have to feel as a filmmaker. There actually may be a time restriction based on the festival itself. They may call short films, shorter than 5 minutes. They may call short films shorter than 30 minutes. So it's always good to read the fine print of any festival that you're submitting to. But a film should be as long as it should be.
A quick add-on to that, Nick, as someone who organizes a film festival, the standard film festivals, they split it between short films and feature-length films. And the cutting off point for most festivals, not all, but for most, is 40 minutes. So anything over 40 minutes is considered a feature-length film. Anything shorter than that is a short film. And typically, films will be segregated out into categories. So like, for example, for our film festival, we're doing Northern features and Southern features as separate categories, and we're providing awards for each category. We're doing Northern shorts and Southern shorts, so films from, cutting up the state geographically from the halfway point. Anything coming from the Portland area is a Northern short that's under 40 minutes. Anything from a Southern short is qualifies for that. And then we also do a K through 12 student category, and we designate that our K through 12 category has to be 5 minutes or less as far as the film goes. So along the same kind of time frame of parameters that we're giving all of you to do for a short film is kind of lumping what we're doing in here into the same context as our K through 12 student films.
And I would also add to that, because we will talk about this on Friday when we talk about distribution and what festivals look for. Kurt's 100% right that most festivals do make that split around the 45 minute mark. But at the same time, I'll note that I don't think I've ever seen a 40-minute narrative scripted short film programmed. I've seen a couple of short docs in that range. I think about 30 minutes is the most I've seen of a short film, and even that's rare. I think most of the time, scripted shorts tend to be under 20 minutes. And I have to say too, as someone who's done a lot of programming for film festivals, I think maybe once or twice have I ever noted in my remarks of a film, I wish it had been longer. Almost always when we as programmers sit around and talk about our films, talk about the films even the ones we liked, we often say it was a little long. it just overstayed its welcome just a little bit. So I think most shorts are better off realizing that, when you go into a short film program, the audience has no idea how long each film is. And so if there is a slow moment, I mean, in a feature film, right, you go in, you're there for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Oftentimes you'll know the runtime before you go in. You're invested. If it slows down for a moment, you're not worried about it. But in a short film program, you have no idea what film to film, how long each film is. And there is a psychological thing that happens when watching a short program when the slightest boring moment feels like, oh no, I'm going to be in this forever. This is never going to stop. So I think it really behooves short filmmakers to think very carefully about how the audience is reacting to every moment.
The crux of the situation from an administrator side, Nick, is like for our festival, we're 3 days. A lot of festivals are a week, or some of the really large ones are might stretch out to 2 or 3 weeks, but there's still finite screen time. And the idea is that you want to pack both quality and quantity. You want to have the best films possible, but you also want to have as many of the best films possible on screen during your window in which you're presenting your festival. So the question then becomes, when you're sitting around and you're debating, like for our festival this year, we got around 90 films submitted that we then whittled down to 36 that we picked for our festival. So Gary was part of the conversations where we're looking at films that each one has different merits that are we like it for this reason, and we like this one for this reason. But if they're kind of balanced out, then do we take the one that is 5 minutes or the one that's 17 minutes? Well, the festival is going to take the one that's 5 minutes, because then we can also bring in this film and this film in that same window, where we would have to sacrifice these three to fit that one. Now, that doesn't mean that you completely cut out the heart of your film for the sake of time. But if there's a way that you can tell the story more concisely, you have a better shot of making it into a film festival.
Yeah, I would compare like the stories you hear about feature films that, the first cut was 4 hours, or the director's version is 3 hours. But feature films in the theaters are typically an hour and a half. So I think the same thing kind of still applies with short films, proportionally. If your film is 10 minutes, then really maybe it should be, 6 minutes. Um, and um, and so a film should be as long as it is, but sometimes it's hard for the filmmaker to take that objective viewpoint, or even subjective viewpoint, and realize like where maybe it needs to be shorter. So just as we're here to try to help teach you all how to make a film, sometimes at the back end, to assess like how well you did, and before you're sort of completely locked and you have no choice but to send it off in the version that it's in, you can bring people in, at the tail end, and be, somebody who like is a programmer for film festivals, or has that discernment, and they don't know that much about the film either. I think that fresh take on it sometimes is extremely helpful. But again, it should be somebody who knows filmmaking. It should just be like some family member or something, and get a little bit of feedback before you fully finish.
Did that make sense, Nick? Okay. We got a thank you from Nick, and it's a little after 12, so we should wrap things up with the assignment.
All right, well, again, come back with a shot list. Recommend roughly at least 3 shots per a scene. Think about how you can give yourself at least 3 pieces of coverage. You can have more if you want, but you got to keep in mind how much time you have to shoot the thing. And be ready to talk a little bit about what you're planning to shoot.
Thanks everybody for hanging in there, and we'll see you in a couple hours. And thank you, Gary.
Good luck. Thanks, Gary.